pre-show now. This is the only way this is going to happen.
Yeah, it's not like it's really particularly important anyway. It's the whole point of the pre-show is to get kind of like the green room experience, right?
Yeah. Keep it going. Reward everybody who's here early. Welcome to all 2 of you. 4, there they are. Hey, if you're tuning in early, go out there and share the show on X and let everybody know, because this is going to be a fun conversation. We've got a lot of autism tonight. It's going to be fantastic,
dude. Speaking of autism, I'm pretty sure that people with autism, speaking primarily about myself, I'm pretty sure that I generate more static electricity than normal people, because I am getting shocked every single time I come within 6 inches of something that's metal. It's unreal. It's
look at me, I've upgraded my position here.
Yeah. we do that.
If I just keep coming back, they'll move me on
that
top.
slot.
Coming for you, Mike.
Hey man, if he wanted it, I would give it over.
No, I don't care.
I appreciate how dedicated you were. I appreciate how dedicated you were to, like, hey, if you get me this list, I'll share it. And I'm like, man, I should probably share our own list more often at the beginning of the show. I'm lazy at that. And Shane reminds us like 4 times.
Yeah. Hey, if you're out there now, all 20 of you so far in the pre-show.
No, I mean,
when
I set up my live streams, it has a YouTube link ahead of time. That's just so I try to set them up like as far in advance as possible. Usually it's only a couple hours in advance because I work all day. So that's why I was asking if you had the thing set up, because it does help. It gets people prepared for your stream. So
yep.
Welcome. We're live. Okay.
This is the pre-shit show, so everything is live, and we have just kind of a good warm up. We've been talking about what's been going on in geopolitics today, and golly, Trump pulling out or pushing in
phrasing.
Yeah, it was not good.
Yeah, there was a lot of politics today. I was just looking at when I was going to get some coffee here before our live stream. Looks like there's going to be a lot of American involvement in the Middle East, which a lot of people want to pull out, but it looks like the opposite's happening.
I missed that one. I heard Tulsi got confirmed, and then I was looking into a lot of like the Mexico cartel.
Oh, did you
stuff.
confirmed?
That's what I heard.
I saw that the Senate. I've missed out on a lot of that. I was working all day, but it's significant. Like a lot of people, we're going to talk about probably some 0 point energy science stuff, UFO stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize the UFO topic is a political topic. It's absolutely political topic. You wouldn't think that it is. And in all cases, it probably shouldn't be. But it absolutely is a political topic with just as much nuance and sides to it as you would see in, a right versus left, social or issue or economic issue or something like that.
Yep.
Now I want to discuss some of that too on the stream tonight, because it goes to show it's like you've kind of got to decide. You don't necessarily have to decide what side you're on, but you've got to decide like what is your objective as a person regarding this UFO disclosure. And we'll get into like what that means.
Yeah, and the other, like, I think a big part of like why it's political is primarily the sourcing of the technology, the sourcing of the funding, like all of that. And that's kind of like the reason why I wanted to really I've wanted to get you on this podcast since really you started the investigation. But I don't really want to go too much into that before we get into like to the intro and then actually get into like the actual conversation, because I have a plan for, especially with your latest stream, talking about the man that you've honed in on that you believe is the guy that leaked the information. So I think we'll go through that, and then that'll give some more credibility to like the patents and the engineers and the physicists that you've interviewed and talked about, because like I think that's the coolest part of all of this, is like the fact that the technology is real.
Yeah, and then the implications. So it's like, you have to decide, are you on the side of the people that just want to stay plugged into the matrix and be like, you know what, life is nice the way that it is, doesn't need to get crazier than it already is? Are you on the side of the people that are like, you know what, pull this thing full throttle, let's see what happens, we might just go flying into a brick wall, or maybe we'll end up in the Andromeda galaxy, but
rip it and grip it,
we're just rolling with it, right? You have to decide that, and it's a real political issue, in the same way where like Amish people decide that, you know what, I don't need any more technology. This is the level of technology where it's like that. We're talking about jumping up like a huge hurdle here. This is not like everybody expects like technology advancement to be this like linear growth thing, but it's like you go from fire to the technology that we're talking about that people would think of as UFO or alien technology, 0-point energy technology. It's just a whole new echelon. Like we're still primitive cave people. That's how you have to kind of think of it.
It's like
And
a
some
jump
people,
in the
I don't blame
Kardashev
people who
scale.
says, you know what, just I'm gonna go live on a farm. Just I'd rather just not deal with this crazy technology. I don't need Star Trek in my life. That's a choice.
And my kids call me a caveman all the time from coming from the 1980s. So it's one of those things where
well, the beard helps.
You're kind of right, kids. Like we had wired phones, for God's sakes. We had nothing like what you guys are experiencing, and what you're going to experience, like in the next 10 years from now, it's going to be absolutely wild.
If I could riff on that real quick, because just like, I was born in the 80s. And I think that there's this huge jump from nobody having phones to everybody having a cell phone. And you actually see that reflected in movies like in the 80s and stuff like that, especially like horror movies, scary movies. Like now it's like a lot of stuff doesn't work where it's like I just have a phone on me all the time. I'm always connected to the internet and everything all the time. It changes the entire landscape of everything. And kids who were born in like the late 90s, early 2000s, they never even experienced a world where that ever existed. And that's going to keep happening. Those types of paradigm shifting technologies are going to keep happening. So go ahead.
Well, I think what we're actually gonna two things before we get into the intro, because I think Shane might be itching to pull the trigger so we can get. But two things real quick I wanted to comment on was like I think what you mentioned about how people think that technology and innovation progresses in a linear format is just like, in my opinion, that's ridiculous for people to think that to begin with, because Moore's law is an exponential function. It's a doubling like every year, every couple of years or something like that. Like that's exponential right there. Like, so like any linear format for development is just going to be completely blown out of the water. But then the other thing too is that, and then we might end up talking about this after when we get like in full swing of the flywheels going, is that I know that you've seen The Lost Century from Dr. Greer. And I think that because we have had basically a century of advancement and development that's been missing and suppressed from the general public, I think that what we're going to experience, like what you're talking about, is that we're going to get that century's worth of technology in a very compressed amount of time. And I think it's going to scare a lot of people, and for some good reason, because we can talk about that tonight too, because we are a military community. But yeah, like I think a lot of like it's that whole kind of a decade's worth of time happens within a couple months. It's gonna be the 2020s are gonna be wild, in my opinion.
Man, that's kind of what they need to like thwart the economic collapse, is they have to have like a giant like technological leap that can like impact the change of the fiat system collapsing.
It pushes the economy to a point where it's in hyperdrive, to where they're outpacing the record amount of inflation that they have. So
yeah,
we can talk about all this, and we're going to talk about all this. Oh, my autism and my little trigger finger is just ready to go. We've got Ashton Forbes here. It is going to be a great show. Sit back, buckle up. Bitcoin Veterans is coming at you now. And welcome to Bitcoin Veterans. I'm your host, Shane Hazel. I've got Jordan with me, Mike Hobart, and our guest tonight is the one and only Ashton Forbes. I'm sure you guys know all about him. Mike is going to introduce him here in a second, but we are here to put you back on the mission as Bitcoin Veterans. What is the mission, you might be asking? We are a group of military veterans and devout Bitcoin advocates, drawing from our shared experiences, defending the values that our nation was founded upon. We champion decentralized, trustless systems that empower individuals and communities, eliminate centralized authority, and advance the cause of a free and open society. By harnessing the transformative power of Bitcoin, we strive to promote a world where every individual has the undeniable right to control their own destiny, assets, and privacy. We stand against tyranny in all forms, using our combined expertise and passion to ensure the promise of liberty thrives. Together, we will continue our oath to safeguard the ideals that define us. We are veterans, we are Bitcoiners, and we are for freedom. Welcome to the show, Ashton. Mike is going to give us a quick intro there for you.
Oh, yeah. So those of you guys that haven't heard of Ashton Forbes, if you like, I can't imagine how you can't, like, especially with Ashton, you're recently going on Candace Owens. That's a podcast that my girlfriend got me turned on to that I probably would have never experienced if it wasn't for her. And the fact that you got onto something that large is like fascinating, and just credit to you on that. And that's a mark of your success to begin with. But I am unapologetically a massive fan of like the investigative work you've been doing. I think I started following you like maybe within the first couple of months of you getting started on YouTube and on Twitter. And the things that you have dug up, I would have never imagined you would have been capable of digging up, and especially with the work of your community. Cause like I'm sure that you're very good at your investigative research, but there's no way you could have dug up all the stuff that you've dug up alone. So like, credit to you and your community that you've garnered there. But those of you that haven't heard the name Ashton Forbes, he has his own YouTube channel. Go search for him in YouTube. His page will pop right up. He's been personally investigating. You guys might remember back in 2014, there was a flight that just kind of literally blipped out of existence, and then the investigation for that flight kind of just like they buried it, like they have many other topics in the last 4 or 5 years alone. And then there's been some interesting information as far as like some of the pieces of the plane like washing up in South Africa, not making any sense for the story that the media has pushed out. And on screen right now, you're going to see video. I believe this is the thermal sat video, Ashton, if I'm not mistaken, of the flight itself. And the thing, Ashton really blew this whole kind of investigation wide open by kind of bringing this video and then the thermal video from the drone footage, which is, I believe, a Predator drone, if I'm not mistaken. And what you're going to see here on the clip as Shane plays it is that there's 3 orbs circulating this massive Boeing, I believe is a 737 or a 747, something like that.
777.
777. So even bigger.
Airlines Flight 370.
Yep. Flight 370. And then right there, it just blinks out of existence.
It's so crazy that like there's a plane that's been missing for almost 11 years now. Almost 11 years this plane's been missing. And this plane disappeared in 2014. 2014 isn't like the Stone Ages, How does a plane disappear? And then the story is that everybody agrees that this plane was flying for 8 hours, and nobody knows where it went
with its transponder turned off
in 2014. But here's the thing. Transponders don't turn off like radar. If I'm shooting radar at you in the sky, it doesn't matter if your transponder's turned off or not. The way radar works is it bounces off of you and then bounces back and they see you. So like this whole thing, when people say stuff like PSYOPs, like psychological operation, this whole disappearing plane is a great example of it, because they convinced the world that a plane can disappear in 2014 with the U.S. military having no idea what happened to it. Even though it flew past U.S. military exercises, flew over several military bases that like the United States has, some people at, flew past or near 2 of our most secret military bases like Pine Gap and Diego Garcia, that we can just believe that a plane can just disappear. And then these videos, this is just one of them, has been on the internet for 10 years, since like right after the plane disappeared. Right away, you're like, wait. When we looked up to figure out how long, what was the earliest time this plane's been this video's been on the internet? It's May 19th, 2014. So that's like 70 days after the plane disappeared. And in the description, it says received March 12th, 2014. That's 4 days after the plane disappeared. So it's like right away from the first video, just reading the description, you're like, okay, either this is already an extremely elaborate hoax, like who would have had the foresight to put this together in such a short window of time, or that's really just the plane and that's a leaked military video because that's not any conventional. You can just tell right away. Whatever you're looking at right there is not commercial camera or any capability. And so a lot of people will ask and be thinking right now, like, well, like who's recording that? And the answer is it took a year and a half for us to figure out that that's actually something called WAMI, wide area motion imagery. And the military has like several different systems that are all use the same capabilities, where it's like they have this huge wide area of like a whole city. And then you can like press on the screen or click, and then it opens up like a video recording where you can just watch like video playback. And it's amazing. I'm not going to go into detail exactly how they do it, but what I'll say is like basis is like they're taking little pictures all the time, like thousands of pictures all the time of everything on the planet. And they can use satellites, drones, etc., to combine this data together. And then this video here is the drone video, and this one's the color changed one. And so it's like, wait, so not only do we have one video, we have two videos. And I thought initially people would just immediately realize this must be real, as hard as it is to believe what we're seeing. But like, just look at those orbs in this video right here. Even in this color changed one, look at those dark lines. The creepiest part is when you realize, after looking at this long enough, that the lines are in front of the orbs. It's like that's where their future is, right? Like then you realize, like, oh, that's their propulsion. That's whatever you see with those dark lines, that's their propulsion. And then when you look at it again in the original like color video, you realize it's cold. That line they're producing is cold. It's black. So this right here is the thing that I'll tell your audience, the people that if you want confirmation these videos are real, what will happen at some point in the future is it will leak out there another video that shows this like cold endothermic propulsion, like what we're seeing here. Is that'll leak out there that this is like the real, or one method at least, of like, you could call it gravity propulsion. Is that what you're seeing there? And so I don't know. It was hard. And then part of this process was realizing that like people won't even believe two military videos that leaked onto the internet of a plane that like impossibly can't disappear. That the United States military, with all their surveillance capabilities, must know what happened to the plane. And no one can believe that, in part because mostly because of the black operation, like the cover up. And then for a lot of people too, it's like, damn, wait, if that's real, what else could be real? How could I get, psyop to thinking that, oh, the plane just crashed somewhere in the, it's like almost like they put it on a map and like, just pick a random spot in the middle of the ocean that nobody is going to ever look at for, right? Like that's where they decided, go search for that plane down there. We ended up finding nothing where they claimed the plane crashed. Nobody even thinks twice about it. And then one last thing I'll say, you guys can jump in, is that everybody also thinks, well, didn't they find pieces of the plane? The official search found nothing. They've searched 3 times. The third search is about to probably finish up here in the next month or two. They're going to find nothing again.
Oh, the third one's happening right now?
Right now. It's happening right now. And I've already said, I've gone on the record saying they're going to find nothing. Absolutely no chance they're going to find anything. And people said
11 years later, you're not going to find crap.
Well, they've got like credible evidence. They're still searching in the South Indian Ocean. There's nothing there. Well, the debris that was found by random civilians, and it was found in Africa. The reason why the official search didn't find it is they're searching 2,000, 3,000 miles away in the South Indian Ocean. So something right away. This is where like the moment people looked at where the debris was washing ashore, like it should have broke the brainwashing that was happening, where people should have been like, wait a minute, that's too far away. There's no way that plane could have crashed in the South Indian Ocean. But instead, people just go, no, it fits the models. It doesn't fit the models. You look at all the debris in like South Africa and like Tanzania and all this stuff. Everybody always points to the one piece that was found in the Reunion Islands, which is still too far away. But that's the closest piece that could have even washed there. The rest of it's impossible. So what I tell people is either the debris is from MH370 or the plane crashed in the South Indian Ocean. Can't be both. Can't be both. Either one or the other. So for me, I think that debris is from MH370. But a better location for that debris to go into the water where it fits with the ocean currents and what have you is Diego Garcia military base. And that's where all the conspiracy theories, when you research it, you realize all the conspiracy theories were like, it went to Diego Garcia. So you're like, oh, it really did go to Diego Garcia. And, we just covered it up. It wasn't even hard.
Well, and I think the hard part was figuring out how it went to Diego Garcia, right? And like you guys investigating into this video is like, oh, they literally blinked it there. Gotcha.
And that was the craziest part is like a lot of people are like, wait, you're saying they teleported the plane? And I'm like, look, if I had a better answer based on what I'm seeing and looking into the physics and everything, I would give it to you. If I could tell you that that was just a cloaking and that they remote controlled it to Diego Garcia, sure, I would tell you that. And maybe I'm wrong and maybe they did. But when you look at this, look at those orbs with that heat signature. No one ever is ever faking that, ever coming up with that. Not
they're
in a
tumbling
years.
thermals. Like
It's
you look at the
spinning,
thermals, they're
Yeah,
you look at the thermals, they're tumbling, and they're like, I mean, we'll get into this in a little bit, like talking about the Pais effect.
it's
Because
like not only are they spinning around the plane, they're also tumbling within their own axes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
no
like
one's ever
that's how like
creating
you
that.
can see how they're changing direction. They kind of
Yeah.
All right, going this way now.
And then you can see the lines, and even the lines in front of them change right before that zap. So
They
you
come in
could
together, yeah.
convince me that that was an annihilation event, that this is some kind of like antimatter or something like that, maybe, because you would need antimatter to prevent E equals MC squared from that like being like something bigger than a nuclear bomb. Because if you were to convert all that matter into energy, it would blow up part of the planet. That's how much, because a Boeing 777 is a huge airplane.
yeah,
And so what's so crazy about these videos is that not only is there like gravity propulsion orbs and these plasma orbs, it's not even a metal object, but then also they're just teleporting a plane. And it's not even like, it's not even like an alien spacecraft. It's a civilian airliner they're teleporting. You're like, wait, oh my God. So then you start thinking about like what it would require to engineer this. And it does seem at first glance like, oh, it's impossible. Like this has to be alien technology. It has to be 1,000 years beyond where we're at. But I'm here to tell you that after researching for a year and a half, it possibly is alien technology. I don't really know. And it is well beyond where we're at right now. But the idea of like how far beyond where it's at right now has more to do with like what our view of the universe is. And if our view of the universe is a view of the universe where it's like not empty, then this technology is not that far advanced. In fact, you could argue that it's more of like ancient technology that we've rediscovered.
hey, there we go.
And it really looks like they've probably done this once or twice before, which is even, I mean, it's they didn't just come up and, oh yeah, the orbs ran into each other and we had kind of a fuck up or something. Like these guys have obviously mastered this, right? And, I think it's worth talking about too, Ashton. You've got some ideas on why that flight was disappeared. And I think that's one of the bigger reasons, why this, at least grabbed my attention. I was like, I didn't know. I'll let you tell the story because I think this is a resounding part of motivation.
Yeah, and I think that the reason I was confused to me why the UFO community wasn't interested in these videos, because I'm looking at these videos, I'm going, wow, it's like perfect triangles. Everybody been talking about triangle formations and plasma orbs recently, and we're seeing it right there. It's like, oh, there's proof of it, and then we're also seeing a wormhole, teleportation. It's like, isn't this exactly what the people who think that the aliens are visiting us want? I mean, how else do you explain aliens visiting us? I don't really get it.
Doesn't show little like, green men, so they don't want to be. They don't.
And
care.
how do you like? A lot of people believe in like remote viewing and psychic power stuff, and like that's only possible if like you can teleport. Like you need that same thing, but like at a conscious level for that stuff to be real. But I found out the community was so divided. But here's the thing: the reason why, and this is related, is because a lot of people don't believe the United States military would do black operations. They just think that we're like angels, right? That we're like the perfect world police and we never do anything wrong or evil.
Not here on Bitcoin Veterans, they don't.
We're perfect. What can I say, guys? Put a little angel cap around, or angel thing around me, halo around me, guys. No, they really do believe that. And this is where it becomes political, is that there's a faction of people that's like, you have to trust the government. And that's the thing about the government too, is that the thing the government fears the most is it losing credibility, it losing that, like, you can't believe in the authority of the government, undermining the credibility of the government. And so that's why they can't admit that they do the stuff like this, but they do these black operations. Like you said, that's not their first rodeo at this. Yeah. Now, maybe it's one of the first times they've done that orbs, but the way those orbs are spinning around the plane and the way that thing zaps the plane, it would be beautiful. It wasn't like 239 people on board that plane. That's like a huge feat to pull off. So the big issue is that they are pulling these black operations off, and a lot of people can't believe that. And the people that can believe that they're doing that Well, now you realize that the depths of this whole UFO phenomenon goes well beyond aliens. And, it's like, okay, well, now this whole thing is about the national security threat. It's not about aliens directly. It's about the technology the aliens represent, or that this, it doesn't even have to be aliens. There's a lot of options in non-human intelligence. It could be future humans. The idea that there is this advanced technology, whoever has this advanced technology controls the planet.
Specifically,
now
the
you're like,
energy
okay.
generation part.
And so the people that have this technology, what would they be primarily doing with it? Consolidating the technology, monopolizing it, making sure that nobody else gets it. That would be the primary thing. And then you would just let all the rest of society continue on the way that it is continuing on. You want to go sell obsolete technology? You want to have Elon Musk shooting stuff to Mars or whatever, dreaming about that? Let him do that. What does it matter to you? The money's still exactly the same. You're basically selling fraudulent, obsolete technology to people when there's something better. But you only break that technology out if you're trying to do something like state-sponsored prevent China from getting that technology. And I think that's what was happening with the plane. I think that when you look at who is on the plane, who is on the plane, that's what everybody asks when you go to the motive. The thing that sticks out like a sore thumb is there's 20 Freescale semiconductor engineers on board this plane. These people were very important people, according to the company themselves. And it's just way too many people from the same company on the same plane. It should have triggered all these red flags about, hey, you have more than 2 people on the same thing. It's like, these aren't just random salespeople. These are the engineers and stuff like that. You can't afford to lose these people.
Yeah.
And then the major red flag. 8 of them are Chinese nationals. 12 of them are Malaysian nationals. But they're working for the American company, Freescale Semiconductors, is connected to U.S. aerospace and defense. It's connected to trying to produce room temperature superconductive microchips that can potentially produce magical effects. Like anti-gravity, potentially free energy, things like that. Like, that's the microchip wars right now. That's what they're doing. That's like why we are competing with China over that, is that creating this technology is all about miniaturization and creating microchips. So, and this isn't something that would have seemed obvious in 2014. And even in 2024, it doesn't really seem obvious to a lot of public people. But people that are kind of in the know about technology and now watching like NVIDIA and its stock price go up 20-fold in the last 3 or 4 years or whatever, people are now starting to catch up because now we're seeing that AI is real. And if you were in the military intelligence community in 2014, you probably already had AI well before we had it publicly. So they probably already had stuff like that. So in 2014, only people who are really in the know would have understood that this is not some weird pilot suicide scenario. This is most likely an espionage or counter-espionage type event that's happening, because the only people that could cover up and hide information the way that was happening when the plane, like, everyone was blaming the incompetence of the Malaysian officials. It wasn't incompetence, it was malice. Like, they were just working with the United States military to cover up and obfuscate and make sure they didn't release any information that would have proven that they were lying later on. Like, if you go back and look at everything like I have, like my team has, I guarantee you that's the conclusion you'll come to. Or if you look at it through that lens of like, if these people were, working with malice, how would they be acting? Like saying stuff like, we can't answer any questions until the investigation completes. Like one day after the plane disappeared, when family members are crying and screaming, asking like, are their loved ones potentially still alive on a raft somewhere? And you're saying, I can't answer any questions until the investigation completes. Sorry, what? The only reason why you would say something like that is because you're afraid that information that was early on that gets out, you're going to have to be, you can't backtrack it anymore, So anyway, there you go. That's the main thing when it comes to why they would potentially do this to the plane and how they would cover it up in the media, is that only the United States government has the capability to manipulate the media the way that, like, we talk about in these conspiracy circles about, they control the media. And it's not as simple as people who try to argue with you over it say, like, well, they're not giving them a script on what to say. You're like, yeah, they're not. Like, the way it really works is more of like, kind of, people have connections to certain people in the media, journalists and stuff like that. It's like, don't report on this, or they influence them not to report on certain things or what have you, or claim that something's, pseudoscience or ridiculous. And that's how they kind of will manage the perceptions of an event like this. People weren't asking the right questions about, like, hey, how can a plane disappear? Where are our satellite imagery? How would we not see the debris field of a Boeing 777 that crashed with our satellites that are spinning around the planet all the time. No one's asking basic logical questions, and that's what they kind of control.
Well, especially with like my experience in the aviation field in the Army, like we bragged consistently about how you could drop a paperclip from the International Space Station and be able to track it all the way down to where it makes contact with the planet. It's like, okay, yeah, if we have capability of doing that for like since I was in, which was the year that this I actually got into the Army a couple months before this plane disappeared. Like if we had that capability since then, like there's absolutely no way that like we wouldn't have been able to see it. And like you've got the evidence.
This meteorite. I was talking to Avi Loeb. This meteorite that he picked up off the ground was also in 2014, also right off the coast of Australia, just on the other side. And it was the DoD that showed him with some satellites that said, yeah, our satellites, like our SIBR system, picked up the heat signature of the meteorite. Here's exactly where you can go search in the ocean, and you can pick up these little metal balls off the bottom of the ocean. They use like a magnet to pick them up. I'm like, okay, if they've got that, you're trying to tell me a Boeing 777, size of a city block, can hold 300 people flying for 8 hours past our military bases and exercise. Nobody saw that. Nobody saw where it went. Come on. It's just
they accidentally closed the browser window, Ashton. Like that's what happened.
Yeah.
But like it's like kind of continuing on like this train of thought here, because there's also another kind of topic we wanted to kind of interweave in here that recently happened. Could you so I have a video to support from your latest stream if you want us to use it, or we can hear it just straight from your mouth as far as like talking about Edward C. Lynn, like the stuff that you guys recently dug up with because like you specifically had an article where you were talking about his kind of like CV. And could you go over that real quick? Because like you get into some of like the black ops, the spec ops stuff that we were just like discussing. And then also like we can use that to it gives a lot of credibility to the technology that like Salvatore Pais and like the other guys you've talked with. I mean,
just look at who, like, it's just when you really line everything up, not only am I ready to point the finger at the U.S. government on this, but ready to point the finger direct at the U.S. Navy. Like this was a U.S. Navy operation, probably in concert with the CIA.
Oh, it would have to be because like intelligence comes from the Navy.
Yeah. And so it's like, okay, and how do I know that? Well, I started looking around for like who could have leaked these videos. I mean, I'm looking at a mouse cursor on the screen. You look at a mouse cursor on the screen, it's like, oh, okay, so this isn't somebody filming this with their camera. So like right away, I knew they were going to get caught. Why? Because I'm a government contractor myself, and every site I've used in or out of government, whatever, everybody uses Citrix, and people were able to tell right away that was a Citrix session that they were doing when they were screen recording that, which means they're logged into the spy satellite database using a remote terminal. And that terminal could be in a skiff or whatever, but it could also theoretically be in someone's house like this, right? So I knew they had logs. I knew they were going to catch that person. I started looking around on the internet. It took me like 2 weeks to find the guy. But when I found him, and I had just like, you get that weird tingling feeling where you're like, holy shit, like this. And you had looked up a bunch of people. I thought there was no way I was going to find him. But my hope was that I realized there was this law that says you can't hide charges unless you're under like martial law. That's the only time where you can hide charges against people. And I knew this had to be a military person because who else would have access to those videos? It wasn't some script kiddie that hacked like some crazy whammy footage or something like that. Like you can tell if like you guys watch the videos enough, you can tell that like it was a military person that leaked those videos and they cropped them and stuff as well. Like they knew about how those systems work. So when I found Lieutenant Commander Edward Lynn, oh man, everything was jeering because he was special ops. He had been like in the right position. He was high enough rank. He was a guy too that we trusted with like everything. Like we trusted him with nuclear weapons, and he graduated from that and became the Navy's congressional liaison, which I would found out, one of these new things we found out, that he had access to like the secret weapon procurement that was classified that the Congress has to sign off on. You're like, no. Whoa, okay. So now you're starting to realize, oh, he was probably exposed to some of these advanced technologies. And he started to realize that there is something out there related to the UFO phenomenon. And then he gets assigned to the VPU-2 Wizards in February 2014. And this is when I went, oh boy. And I just knew, okay, now he's assigned to this Navy spy plane program. He's in the right position, everything. He has to be the guy. his lawyer says the classified information in question was available on the internet. And I'm going, and they came down on him super hard. And they made him take a plea deal because they were terrified of something called gray mail. Gray mail is they're terrified that if the case goes to trial and it's public, he's just going to blurt out something that would damage national security. And people can use this as leverage to say, like, hey, don't charge me with as much. Otherwise, I'm just going to go blurt out all these national security. Like, hey, we zapped MH370 out of the sky. Could you imagine if in the middle of the trial, he just yells that out? Right? So this is what they were terrified of. So they basically forced him into a plea deal. Even after the plea deal and just like removing the espionage charges, he still got stuck with 6 years in prison. So one of the other things we looked up as well was we found all the appeals. I found out everything related to his case. I'm 100% sure this is the guy. I'm as sure as you can possibly be. He had to be the guy that leaked his videos. So he gets investigated like right after the plane disappears as well, which you're going, oh, okay, well, it's because, again, he's recording this. He got caught. They figured it out. The VPU-2 Wizards, it's not just some spy plane program. It's like the super secret spy plane program where I found these old Reddit threads about it because people were looking up like what he was and then the case around him, just related to the case around him, not connected to MH370. And some people are like, the VPU-2, oh, that's the kind of people where like they take their badge off when they're overseas, like when they're not inside the U.S. country, which is implying they're doing black operations where if you get caught, you have, you know, you weren't related to us if you got caught kind of stuff.
Plausible deniability.
Exactly. And then you're looking back at the MH370 videos, you're going, oh, shit. There was a French father on the Netflix documentary. You can watch it, Guillaume Latrelos. And he lost his wife and his child on the plane. And so he was very connected to, like, you know, people in the West trying to figure out the truth of what happened on the plane. He lost his whole family. And he was told that the United States knows exactly what happened on the plane, that there were 2 AWACS spy planes in the area at the time. How much you want to bet? One of those was the VPU-2 Wizards, and that Edward C. Lynn was on one of those planes that night. And he was looking at those videos in real time on the spy plane, which is exactly what those planes do. They fuse intelligence, and then they relay that to upper command, who's like managing the operation. He saw that, probably freaked out. He might have even thought that was aliens. Because a lot of people look at it right away, the first thing they think is, oh, that must be aliens. Maybe he thought it was aliens, and maybe he wasn't even in the know. You're like, hey, you're on this operation, you're doing surveillance, you're not in the know on what's going on. Just do your thing and report up, you know, whatever the reason. It feels like he had an emotional reaction. Just like, I won't go into too much detail, but it doesn't, when you look at the videos and the way they're cropped, it doesn't look like he was trying to damage national intelligence. It looks like he was just trying to tell the world the truth about this technology and these orbs and this plane. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they put him in prison, and here's the thing. He's the guy. If he wasn't the guy, wouldn't he reach out to me? I've been saying his name. I said his name on Candace Owens, said his name on Hodge Twins. I've said his name redacted, millions and millions and millions of views. Wouldn't he reach out and be like, hey, I'm not the guy. Like, stop aligning me to these videos and this missing plane and all this stuff. I even reached out to his lawyer. So yes, he knows because I reached out to his lawyers and begged his lawyers to talk to me, and they refused. Like, I would only talk to their clerks. And the lawyers are like, no, you have to get a release from Edward Lynn. And I can't find Edward Lynn. I'm reaching out to his family, calling the phone numbers I find on the internet related to him. He's on the lam. Like, it's like he's on the run, basically, you know, which to me implies guilt in terms of having leaked the videos. And the reason why I say that is because of his plea deal, it's almost guaranteed he has an NDA that's probably very strict that says, like, he can never talk about the videos. Some people are speculating he might not be allowed to use the internet, like, at all, like in terms of you can't have a social media presence, you know, anything like that. Because people wonder what does being banned on the internet means. It means no social media presence, right? Like, sure, you can make an anonymous alt somewhere, but like nothing that says, hey, I'm Edward Lynn and I'm hanging out today, right? Stuff like that. So yeah, so basically, go ahead, jump in.
I was going to say, one of the other things too that you found that really added credibility to it was they tried slapping him with he was pillow talking with a prostitute, and one of the prostitutes, I believe you found out, was actually an FBI agent.
Yeah, they did a honeypot thing with the FBI. It's like, why are they doing that? If you have a guy on spy charges, like exchanging information with China, and you have evidence of that, Why would you run a prostitute sting on a guy? You're not. The only reason why you do anything like that is because you're trying to build a bad case into something that you can prosecute. Like you need actual evidence that you can prosecute, that you can show in the court of law, because you can't show those videos. And he didn't do anything else. Like he didn't exchange any information with anyone from China. So you have to run a sting operation on him, and you have to slander him and be like, the guy is like into prostitutes, and like what, a prostitution charge next to an espionage charge? Like, what is this? And if you actually just look at the details of the case, again, I guarantee you realize that this is one of the fishiest cases out there. There's other espionage cases, and they say exactly what it is that the person leaked. They say how much money they paid for it. For this case, they say nothing at all. They abused him. They kept him locked up in pretrial detainment. And again, the reason is because they're afraid he's going to go to the media and CNN and yell out, I leaked videos of MH370. We teleported MH370. By the way, there's teleportation technology and we have it. Right? Because if a guy comes out and says that in 2014, I mean, it's going to be a story. People are going to freak out, right?
That pretrial detainment, by the way, for people that don't know, was 8 months long.
8 months pre-trial. They didn't want him to go, and then they go into a plea deal. They go into a plea deal because their case is weak as hell, and because they have to go into a plea deal because they can't show the only evidence they have. Like even the judge has to like sign off on stuff related like pre-trial detainment, what have you. And the evidence they used to sign off to say that he was such a huge risk was just like mundane emails. They didn't have like literally anything against this guy. And you're like,
they used the 8 months to try and build a case against him, and they failed. They used the 8 months to try and build a case against him, and they still failed.
And they didn't arrest him until 2015. So they actually waited like almost a year and a half to even arrest him after they had already probably found out about the videos. And that's also strategic for people wondering, oh, is that weird? No, you can't arrest him right after the plane disappeared, especially if he leaked the videos. Like then people are going to really put the dots together. That's Imagine right. You arrest him in May. And then the news articles are guy gets arrested for espionage, blah, 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 right next to like, and we just released these satellite pings of this plane that's still missing, right? People are going to be like, wait, what's this U.S. Navy spy guy thing here, right? So they wait till 2015, cases died down. They've, been digging up. They're probably trying to, honeypot him, trying to build anything they can at that point to slander the guy.
Yep.
Because his family's making websites going like Edward Lin isn't a bad guy and like why is he being slandered, and the whole thing, the whole works. So I've even had like Sam Shoemate, who's Sean Ryan's buddy, actually offered to help out and reach out because I realized during that whole Cybertruck scenario that all the special operators are like a close-knit community. So people have got to know that Edward Lin, and it's got to be relatively like famous behind the scenes about this guy getting charged with espionage in 2015, and so people must have been talking about what is it that he leaked, so somebody out there, people have got to know. And end of the day, people say, oh, you might be putting him in danger. Man, guys, we're so far past that, and the truth of those videos being real, just the possibility they're real, it's bigger than any of us, any individual on this planet. Like we're looking at Star Trek right there in front of us. If those videos are real, it's catastrophic disclosure. Aliens honestly become an afterthought because you're like, well, shit, we can teleport. We might have free energy. Sure, we're sure there's aliens out there. Sure. Like, right? Who cares? Cool. Yeah, cool. So at that point, it's like, look, I got to find Edward Lin. People wonder what's the next thing. Got to find Edward Lin. He needs to talk to me. He doesn't have to tell me even. The crazy part, we have so much evidence. He doesn't even have to say I leaked these videos. He doesn't have to say whatever about the videos. He just has to tell me, where were you on March 8th, 2014? Were you on deployment? Were you on deployment? Were you somewhere in the Pacific or, the Indian Ocean, right?
Were you on the ground?
Yeah, exactly. Like, something like that, and I'm just giving one example. I'm not giving away my whole hand here, but that's just one example. It would be very, very, very easy to prove based on how much evidence we have that he leaked the videos. And I think that's the reason why he's on the run, in hiding or wherever.
He's like, you could figure this out way too easily. I just can't even risk talking to you.
It's got to, and truthfully, I mean, maybe somehow I'm wrong, right? Maybe somehow I'm wrong. But if it turns out I am right, this would be the craziest story ever. I mean, just finding the guy that leaked these videos just through old-fashioned investigative, like looking on the internet. Like one of the things about this case that if I were to make a movie about it, I'd really want there to be this element of like crowdsourced investigative work. Because like you guys pointed out, it wasn't just me. And especially in the beginning, people across Reddit, 4chan, Twitter, everybody was digging into these videos. And in the beginning, I was just amplifying stuff that I thought was credible or interesting. And then when that died down, I just took it in my own hands and I found stuff like Edward Lynn and what have you. But, you know, having the whole group behind me that's researching all this stuff, that's how it made this stuff possible. And it goes to show that like fact checking, if it's done in an honest fashion, is extremely powerful. Like crowdsourcing work and using the internet to search for stuff, it can be very powerful. But when you start to distort it and abuse it like fact checkers do, where they like distort the meaning of the words and stuff like that, then it destroys it. So the reason why I say that is because I think that what happened with MH370 in another situation could be a good template for how to solve some of this stuff that, you know, is gone cold and people have just kind of given up.
Hell yeah. Jordan, you have to be itching because you wanted to hop in. He touched on a topic that you wanted to ask Ashton about a little bit. So
yeah, I mean, I was like, ooh, perfect segue. So it sounds like you're pretty like read up on it, but with the Cybertruck Green Beret and his manifesto, to me, I hate even using that term. It was just an email that he wrote to some people. It's not a manifesto, but to me, it was pretty clear that he like gave his bona fides, like, this is who I am, and cut right to the point of like, we need to talk about gravitic propulsion systems and how these are like a mutually assured destruction event. And then continues on with like, here's some other information to back up like who I am. To me, that was the most interesting part of this entire situation. I was like, he was trying to tell us something. And if this is real, this is also happening like on the heels of all these New Jersey drones and stuff. It kind of seems like there's this technology where you can just zap a bunch of drones over the White House or over Beijing. And if you can just do that with no payload or anything, that's enough of a threat of like, imagine if those were all loaded with a payload, how we could just zap into your defenses, like take out your entire government leadership, zap out, and you have no way of proving it was us. Like nukes are pointless at this point.
Yeah,
that to me is like how I read that situation. I'm wondering how this ties in with everything that you've researched and looked into.
It's so closely tied to what I've been doing that people were like, hey, do you think this guy was like your follower or something? Like that's how weird it was that it came out like that when that email, especially because everybody was trying to paint him as like this crazy guy, the FBI and everything in the public. And then it turns out like, no, he was like trying to whistleblow and get Sean Ryan's attention. And, you know, there's these other normal correspondence with his wife comes out where like he's like comparing the Cybertruck to his shoes, just like normal guy stuff. It doesn't ring any weird.
Just to back up like what you said earlier about like what that community is like I also was a Green Beret, and it's very quick to like you reach out to other guys, and I don't know the guy, but it's like I know a guy who knows the guy. Like it's a small community. It doesn't take too many hops, and everyone is like immediately, none of those stories are true. He was perfectly mentally fine, great family. Like
the FBI lied about the DNA test. The FBI went and did a press release where they said the DNA test of his child didn't match what they found in the body. And then the wife did an interview that's not even well known. I don't think the mainstream media even reported on it. That said, no, they did do a DNA test and it matched.
Yeah, she called in with Matt Tardio.
Because they would lie to be like, oh, he found out it wasn't his kid, and that's why he did this. Like, no.
And it's like, you look at that letter, just like you said, it's like he does his bona fides. And people are like, oh, well, they got the wrong year on the car or something. This is where Sean Ryan and the other special operators guys were like, no, there's some acronym for it. Like ISOPREP. Yeah. It's like, oh, no, that's the secret password that says like he's in danger. You're like, wait, what? Are you kidding? And like somehow the public has just kind of ignored that whole aspect of it. And then he just goes straight into the drone. It's not just like, hey, we have alien technology or weird shit like that. He's like, no, here's 4 paragraphs about we've got these drones and we're in this war with China. And like you said, it's mutually assured destruction. Oh, and then by the way, here's some more bona fides and here's some black operations that happened that the UN looked into, but we killed
Here's the location
the UN says. And you look into them and they're real. They're all real. You're like, okay. So like, wait, what part of this is fake? Like of this letter? Because
in the way the way his emails were written, like it is exactly how you're kind of trained in that community to send out an email. Like, hey, this is who I am. I've got to get immediately to my point because I'm writing to a commander or whoever, and you may not give a shit about what I have to say. So I better get to my point up front. If I still have your attention, here's additional information to like verify.
Oh, and I forgot.
I know what I'm talking about.
He left the coordinates of Groom Lake, which is known as Area 51 as well. Just a random warehouse right there. Like, this is one of the things that actually reminded me of MH370, where it's like, we've got coordinates right there. You think we should go look in that warehouse that this guy left in an email? Maybe with, should we go look in this warehouse that this guy is doing? There's some pretty specific coordinates to throw out there, unless you just think he was a big Bob Lazar fan. But he actually was a special operator. He actually was working on drones since November. Like, you look at his history. I looked at his LinkedIn, and he had also worked with hyperspectral cameras. Well, guys, we were looking at some pretty amazing camera footage, some videos from the U.S. military of a plane disappearing. These aren't normal off-the-shelf cameras. So this guy's got all the right stuff to have been exposed to some exotic technology out there. And the whole story makes basically no sense whatsoever. So I don't really know exactly what happened with that guy, but I do agree absolutely a point on the technology that this type of technology is something people have to wake up to because, like you said, the drone itself is the payload. When we look at those MH370 videos, assuming they're real, we can learn a lot of information about our super advanced weapons because the drone itself is a plasma drone, which itself is just, they call them ball lightning for a reason. It's basically just a ball of energy. And at some point, these guys learn that they can like polarize it, make it positive or negative, and jam them together, just like you would jam magnets together. But these are much more powerful magnets than what you could jam together at home. And then what happens? This massive repulsive effect. But they learned that you could do that and do what you see to happen to the plane there, where it's almost just breaking through reality. But this isn't that unexpected. When we look at Einstein's general relativity, and people looked at it, especially in the 90s, when people started to really play around with the math, they realized you can do that. Miguel Alcubierre realize you can actually make a warp drive if you play around with the math of gravity, is that you can make a machine, a craft that will accelerate forever, break what we would imagine to be the laws of physics. And then we started looking at it more and said, well, if you just take that to its extreme, you can actually potentially make a wormhole, which is like invisible connection between two distant points. So to me, the most amazing part was the more I looked into everything around the plane, the more everything checked out for those videos being real, from this obvious cover-up related to the plane, a bunch of witnesses that report this fire event. So there was a very weird espionage event happening with this plane. The technology, realizing that, oh, yeah, no, there is like this idea of zero-point energy and how the UFOs might be flying, and plasma technology like cold fusion might have been actually suppressed to cover up this exact technology we see right here. And that wormholes and warp drives and stuff like that, like, it are considered science fiction by a lot of people, but maybe because they've been trying to dumb us down, it turns out like, nope, those things are actually feasible, just potentially with a slightly different, we don't need like a brand new different set of physics. We just need a different perspective on our universe.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say is this, is like that different perspective is the difference between looking at this cup, for example, and thinking that this cup is empty, although imagine it's transparent. The difference between looking at this cup and going, oh, that cup is empty, versus realizing it's like half full. That's the difference between academics' view of the universe versus the view of the universe that allows for magical type properties to occur.
Well, especially the existence of the ether. Go ahead, Shane.
Well, yeah,
Exactly.
that's where I was.
Basically what I'm getting at, the idea of the ether.
Yeah, let's get into the ether a little bit, because
Okay.
I really like, this is fun, theoretical, and possibly obviously potential now, right? Are you? I don't know if you saw or anything from Terrence Howard. He kind of explains this well in terms of diagramming what the ether is, but you've gone into how we can pull energy from the ether. And I think that was, something that a lot of people, maybe just have never thought about or don't think is possible. Why don't we go into that for a minute? Because I think this is one of the most fascinating pieces about, technology and energy, like pulling energy in and where we're at as human beings. What we understand is absolutely just a scratch of the surface in terms of energy creation.
Yeah. The ether idea that Terrence Howard brought up is, so a lot of people think that this idea of the ether is not real because of this Michelson-Morley experiment. But if you take that same experiment, just flip it on its side, you will see what we would expect to see, this phase shift happen of the light, which would imply that it's potentially related to gravity. So I think that there is an ether of energy, but it's not something that like you can visibly just see with your eyes. It's at the quantum level. It's at a level that's below our perceptible level, but it's there. And that energy all around us is like water being in a fish tank and moving around. And this is why that energy is what's giving us inertia and mass. Otherwise, we wouldn't have inertia and mass, even in outer space. So that 0 point energy is the ether. And in fact, I'm not the first person to come up with this. In fact, it's not really even my idea originally. Like people like Friedwart Winterberg, who is a Project Paperclip scientist that came across and was a fusion scientist that has a lot of classified work with the U.S. military. He had this Planck ether hypothesis. And there's also this 0 point energy hypothesis that I've kind of been promoting related to Hal Puthoff's work, Bernard Hayes. So there's been multiple different people that have all come to the same conclusion, just based on the idea that space is not empty and that what we think of as nothingness, the emptiness between the atoms and what have you, there actually is this energy that's there. And if there is energy there, then we can tap into it. So it's just a matter of, okay, well, what's the nature of that energy to figure out how we can tap into it. So 0 point energy is basically saying that at that quantum level, everything is like there's a sea of energy around us and it's never stopped. It's never stopped. Space energy, I saw someone put in the chat, but it's always jiggling. You can imagine always moving. There's no rest, which means there's unlimited energy there to be tapped into. We just have to figure out if there's this sea of energy that's constantly jiggling, how do we tap into that jiggling and pull it out into the observable reality that we are occupying. And when you look at free energy devices specifically, the reason why I bring this up is because this is a reservoir of energy that's all around us. And so this is now no different than solar or wind, right? We're just harnessing this energy that's all out there. So it's alternative energy, no different. When you look at how you might tap into this energy out there, then is that through resonance potentially to pull it out. But the free energy devices that work are basically either magnetic motors, plasma itself might be like just a tap directly into the 0 point energy, and then microchips. And with respect to the first one there, which was the magnetic motors, is that when you look at some of these magnetic motor devices, they always pull energy out of the environment. They reduce weight, which is mass, and they also cool the region. So these effects that we see from supposed free energy devices coincide with what we would expect from a 0 point energy ether hypothesis around us. Because if you're pulling energy out of a region, you're cooling it down, and you're taking that energy and you're moving it somewhere else. So that's the main idea around this 0 point energy ether hypothesis on how theoretically we could pull energy. And then it just becomes an engineering problem. Like, okay, we've got an effect like the Casimir effect says you put plates together and they automatically come together. Now we need to figure out a way, okay, how do we get the plates reset without using energy to do that? And so those three examples that I just gave you, microchips can potentially do it because they can interact on a small scale. Plasma, cold plasma specifically, can basically create ball lightning, which you can just harness the electricity. And then the one I was just describing there a second ago, which is magnetic motors as well. Could be three different ways where we might be able to harness this energy.
So one of the things continuing on this topic, because like I'm assuming we're basically going to spend probably the next 30 minutes to an hour talking about the technology because this stuff is freaking fascinating. But I put into our private chat here for the stream one thing that I would like to ask you to kind of talk about a bit, because you also had an interview with Salvatore Pais, and where he talks about his shock of seeing the video and just being able to be like, yeah, like I know exactly what's going to happen. And like, it ties into what we were pointing out earlier.
I can share, right?
You
want
me
to
to
share
share
that clip?
Yep.
I think it's this one right here.
And real quick before you hit
play, I might just go to the bathroom real quick while you play this. What were your impressions when you saw specifically this video here for the first time?
Oh man, when I saw those orbs, I saw this thing, this one orb just start exactly what it's doing now. Just start to go around this thing. And all of a sudden it started joining another one and then another one. And I said, oh my God, they're forming a bubble of non-ionizing radiation around this thing. There's no way what's about to happen. I anticipated. Do you understand? I knew before that black hole happened. Let's call it a black hole.
You knew that was going to happen beforehand?
I knew that would happen. I knew that would happen. That's why when I said, this is it. This is the Pais effect. I of course, it's, hubris. That's the only thing I got going for me, brother. That's not one thing I'm losing anytime soon. So,
have you ever seen videos like this? Military videos like this before? Anything even similar or remotely similar to this?
Never, ever. And even if I have, because
you wouldn't be able to talk about
at one point I would not be able to discuss, because that would give away methods.
Why do you think they're converging like that at the end?
They're actually focusing as much non-ionizing radiation around this craft in order to condition the local vacuum around the craft, the aircraft, in order to form this wormhole opening for one of the back. What's a wormhole? It's really a black hole connected to white hole. Whatever has an entrance will most likely have an exit. I do not believe in space-time singularities. I'm afraid Penrose was 100% wrong from this point of view. It never goes to zero. There's a quantum bounce. Ashtekar is correct. There's an Ashtekar bounce at the Planck scale. Again, the whole idea of why I thought that they were getting close and started to oscillate around this thing is to basically create that resonance effect that would build the field to the levels it would need to break locally the Schwinger limit.
Wow. So real quick, Ashton, for like for some of our viewers, like so I'm a millennial. I grew up with a lot of like animated movies and stuff, and what this made me think of immediately was for those of you in the audience that have seen the movie Titan AE.
Oh yeah.
There's a part where the main character gets put into a prison where the walls are all pure energy. And the way he gets out is he draws his fingers to a point, and it causes that energy to get pierced, and then he can use that to open up the walls and be able to get through. And I was like, okay, this is fascinating. That's exactly what just happened.
Yeah, man, people are sleeping on Salvatore Pais. Like, and what you put in the private chat was his plasma compression fusion device. It took me actually until the Candace Owens interview to realize that he's not just guessing. When that was my second interview you guys just watched that clip of. The first interview, I didn't understand why he wants to talk to me. Like, what? Like, I'm just some random nobody. He was the first person I ever spoke to on a podcast, on my own podcast, at least.
Oh, really? Okay.
And, he replied back right away and wanted to talk to me. And then that's why I wanted to, the second time I spoke to him, I'm like, okay, I had realized already he either made those orbs or he knows what's going on. He knows more than is being led on here, because those patents, if you add up all the patents, it adds up to the orbs. Like, we're seeing the gravity wave, we're seeing the superconductivity, we're seeing the plasma. Those aren't orbs of metal. That's a ball of plasma that we're seeing there. Why is he getting giddy with me the first interview? Well, now we know, because he looked at that video for the first time and he knew right away what was going to happen. How could he know what was going to happen? First time I looked at that video, I'm going, what am I looking at here? Like, what is this? That was the first time. And like, wait, that plane just disappear? Like, what? Wait, what? Go back and do that again. Like, that was my first reaction.
Yeah.
So when I asked him that, and he's like, oh, yeah, I saw that. And I realized right away they're bathing it in non-ionizing radiation. I'm going, bro, what? And then so when he says, I knew we were about to see the Pais effect. So Salvatore Pais really only wants to name two things. One is the Pais effect, which is when you break the Schwinger limit, which you could think of as like the ceiling of reality, where it's like if you have this much focused electromagnetic energy, you can like break through that ceiling of reality, and then you get to like the true nothingness. And when he says they were conditioning the vacuum, this is another term that goes to like Hal Puthoff when they talk about 0-point energy and the ether, and conditioning the local vacuum has to do with getting space-time ready for this bubble that you're about to create, essentially. So usually when we think about like polarization, a lot of times it's like positives and negatives, like you're lining everything up, or we think about with like glasses. If you take like polarized lenses and like stack them next to each other, you can make it so that the light doesn't pass through. So kind of the same idea of space-time is you're basically getting it ready for a wormhole to happen, I guess. And for Salvatore Pais to be like this excited, this guy again. So we've got Edward Lynn. He was a U.S. Navy Special Forces kind of guy. Now we've got Salvatore Pais, also U.S. Navy, also has 5 UFO patents that he's now on the record on multiple podcasts saying he's not sure why those patents were allowed to be released himself, showing that like there is probably a faction of people that is, wants this information to get out there in the public realm. And he's out there saying that he knew what was going to happen in here, and he's got these papers, and he's desperately trying to get this information to the world. And so this is where I think people should be taking this a lot more seriously in terms of, this technology is potentially legitimate, instead of all the articles that I went back and read, especially about Sal's patents, saying like, oh, this is disinformation to get China to waste their time on science that doesn't really work. Like, come on. Are you like seriously, people? Come on, man. I've spoken to Sal multiple times. You really think that? Like, that's wild to me.
Well,
yeah, because an entire country is going to put so many resources into a science that would be provably wrong or something. Like,
yeah, they can just do one experiment and be like, oh no, it wasn't working. No, just kidding. As opposed to like doing one experiment and realize like, oh wait, all 5 of these patents might be real. Like, oh okay, now let's spend $100 billion and figure out this UFO technology. And I'm like 99% sure Sal has seen some UFO or something. And even when he said he had never seen videos like that, well, the next thing he said right after that is, even if I had, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I'd have to lie.
He took some time to answer that. He took some time to answer that. He was mulling over whether he could actually answer that question.
When he says, I can't say anything else about this, and then cuts it off there, that's a pretty
good indication. Why that's important too. The drone video, the one that's in color and thermal from the side angle, that video, why are they filming that? Why are they doing that? Like that video, when you really look at it, you realize that's not just for like a trophy to put on your. They're doing it for intelligence purposes. Like you give that to the engineer, you give that to Salvatore Pais, and you go, bro, here you go. Here's your orb tech that zapped a plane away. Now you can see how it played out, because you can't test that all the time. You don't get a lot of opportunities to zap a Boeing 777 out of the sky without people noticing, right? So, and
you can't just take a video of it because there's so much being done that we can't see just on our visual spectrum. Like you have to have some thermal and other things. Yeah.
And this goes now to the UFO phenomenon. Now we start to realize, assuming those videos are real, they're just the Rosetta Stone to the physics, the Rosetta Stone to this old UFO phenomenon, which I've now decided that, just like a lot of people thought, most of these people are just grifter type people. Because you look at that and you go, nobody's ever going to be able to use like a cell phone and get a good UFO video if a lot of these videos, if a lot of this stuff's just plasma orbs. It's just a ball of light. Someone's always going to have plausible deniability, say, well, that's just Venus or a star or something like that. You need infrared and thermal to see what we were seeing in that video. So it points out 2 things. One thing is that the public, without high-grade military videos, we're never going to have convincing footage that's going to settle the UFO phenomenon. And on the other side, there is high-grade military footage, and they're clearly hiding. There's no way that's the only video. They probably got a stockpile of videos, man. It's probably like a Blockbuster or whatever. You know, you guys have your own.
That's just the one they wanted their adversaries to see.
Yeah, but I do think that's the one that they wanted. No, I think that's the one they wanted no one to see. Like the reason why they came down to Edward Lynn on that video is that they didn't want anyone to see that video. That might be like the crown jewel because you can figure out so much from just the one drone video. Like if we just had that satellite video, we would just know there's crazy, weird things spinning around the plane. But from the drone video, you can tell like that's a ball of plasma. That ball of plasma proves cold fusion is real just based on the temperature. We can see the endothermic propulsion of the orbs. We can see that this zap of the plane was not an explosion. It's not white hot. It's black.
Yeah, right.
And it actually like opens and closes again.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so you're like, first thought is, looks like a wormhole, but it actually is like, so that video, that one might be, it would be hard for me to even imagine a video that gives away more information than that video does. And then the best part, my favorite part, there's no aliens anywhere in that video. And when you start to look at it from the camera operator, again, of just the drone video, the drone operator knew what was going to go down. You can just tell if that was like the first time that drone operator's ever seen some orbs, that's not how the camera work would be playing out. Like they would be freaking out, moving around. It would probably pause for a second while the person's going, "Holy F, what am I looking at?" Right for a second. Instead, it's like they're perfectly trying to get on the plane because they know something's about to go down on the plane. They zoom out right before the zap happens, gets it like perfectly in frame, and then not perfectly in frame, but as good as they were gonna get. And then the plane disappears, and the person just casually like, "Yep. Okay,
all right, back to business.
Operation. Time to go get a drink." It's like that's not so. You look at it from that perspective, and you realize like this was a U.S. military operation, and that's what they're deathly afraid of. Because what I've determined from the UFO space out there is that there's a clear narrative being sold to the public by people connected to the U.S. government intelligence community, that they want us to believe that the U.S. that we can't understand this technology, this alien technology, but aliens are real, but we can't really understand their technology. It's like beyond humans. It breaks our laws of physics. You can't figure it out. Don't even think about it. Right. And that's what I think that they're trying to play on us. And this video destroys that narrative because this video shows there's only two options. Either we have some agreement with the aliens that are controlling those orbs, and we're running an operation with them, which, was already hard to believe enough with what we got going on. Or that's just our technology and that's our operation. And where it came from, kind of irrelevant. But I'll leave that for, there's a lot of options of where it could have come from.
Do you think with all this like congressional hearing and talks, and all of a sudden we've changed from calling them UFOs to UAPs, is a way to just like, look, UFOs has this like stigma to it. You talk about that, people think you're crazy, but we'll just come up with this more professional term, UAPs, which basically means the same thing. And it just is like it changes people's psychology and thinking about it and normalizes
they've just admitted it. The people that developed that, Hillary Clinton's one of the people that did, and she was clearly in this group of people that I call them woke disclosure because they are clearly pushing this agenda of the aliens and the people that are obsessed with aliens, and that this idea that like aliens being real is going to wake people up and we're going to all give up, Christianity and our religions and like form a one world government and become a utopia or something like that, which is nonsense fantasy that will never
after the invasion
happen. After the invasion. Yeah. And then by the way, that the aliens might be coming to invade us or whatever. Which, at the same time, I think is just so absurd because aliens have no impact on my life whatsoever being real. Unless they're here, doesn't impact my life. Whether or not there's an amazing civilization in the Andromeda Galaxy or even in Alpha Centauri, doesn't matter at all. And it doesn't even surprise me. There's aliens in the ocean. I call it an octopus or a squid. It's the other weird creatures I see on these nature shows. To me, that's an alien.
What? If they had this technology and could have come and invaded and taken over Earth, why did they wait until after we got nukes? Why didn't they do it before then?
Well, that's an interesting thing because there is this huge connection. Like Robert Saleh and what have you have said that, well, they came and these UFOs shut down the nukes or what have you,
Yeah.
because they don't want us to use them. You could argue like nukes give off like an EMP, and you could argue that 0-point energy is kind of like the other side of the coin to nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And if they're giving off some kind of scalar EMP, like if you're surfing on a wave and someone's knocking your wave over, kind of messes you up. So you could say, or you could argue that, you know, they've now achieved a level of technology where they understand something about the universe that makes them a threat. Not to the scale of what 0-point energy do, but it puts you on the map, puts you on the radar. Like, oh, okay, you reached the first milestone.
Yeah, like
now,
a Kardashev scale, but for like weaponry or transportation.
It's like you first start with now my same phone. You take the mass of this phone, like realizing the atomic bombs, like realizing like mass of this phone is energy. This phone is made out of energy. That's the genius of Einstein, is mass is energy. And then when you look at all the equations and you just can pull out mass and replace it with energy, it changes our whole view of the universe. Everything's just energy. And you realize that the amount of mass, even in just this tiny phone, is the weight, the mass of this times the speed of light squared, aka a very, very, very big number. So you realize even a small amount of mass is a huge amount of energy. The thing that I think is the national security issue that they won't talk about that's related to UFOs is the energy source of UFOs.
Bingo.
And the flip side of the coin of the E equals MC squared and the energy thing is you don't even need the mass of the phone anymore. Why? Because there's energy all around us everywhere. So instead of even using the phone, we don't need this anymore. Instead, just pull the energy all around us, use that to create a nuke if you want. Or just make a black hole. And then everything just gets sucked away and that's it. In an instant, all gone. And that you could realize something that's like almost infinitely more powerful than a nuclear weapon. You can see why you would classify that under national security, right?
How much of all of this is kind of tied to Nikola Tesla and all of his research that got shut down? Because it sounds like the same thing. Like, whoa, he's figured out how to do something that we don't want everybody to know about.
Yeah, Nikola Tesla. People are talking about Paul Dirac C as well. When you look at it, that was one of the things where I was just like, okay, wait, what? It's like you start to look into the science. I always say there's three things that you look into. You look into like the physics, you look into the engineers, the Black Project engineers specifically, and then you look into the history of this science in general. And you realize people have been talking about this since Nikola Tesla, radiant energy, before quantum mechanics was even a thing. Yeah. Before we even understood 0-point energy. He called it radiant energy. He's the guy that a lot of people think that Nikola Tesla wasn't even like a real person. I didn't think he was until I became an adult. All the energy we use right now is all alternating current, 3-phase alternating current. Nikola Tesla invented that. Yep. All the stuff we still use today, 150 years later. And when you really look, this is another mind bender for you guys, is in the last year, I asked a very basic question, like, where does electricity even come from? Where does electricity come from? Coming from the power plant. What does that mean? How's the power plant creating energy? Almost all energy and electricity we produce today is basically just spinning a copper coil through a magnetic field.
Completely barbaric.
When we do this,
it's no different than a water mill.
Current. That's what Nikola Tesla realized, and we're still doing that. That's all we're doing.
Yep.
Sometimes we have.
That's all nuclear power is.
Yep, nuclear power is just steam spinning a turbine, literally doing the same thing. That's literally all we're doing. No one ever thought like, this is a cool concept. Maybe there's a more efficient way to have electricity form. Nope, we just go. Nope, don't even think about it. Just keep spinning a copper. It almost makes me think of Rick and Morty, where like this mini-verse episode. Where the whole point of this tiny civilization is just people just like literally like stomping on something to produce the energy for something. Like literally that's what it feels like all we're doing. Shouldn't someone have thought like, Google boxes. Where's that? How is that? Why is it doing that? And is there another way to do that without just spinning the copper coil? You know, so what's the real answer then? And again, this is just from my research. I'm giving you guys the very brief summary. All my live streams are out there publicly, so you can watch my evolution. But Tom Bearden said it best. Tom Bearden, legendary Black Project engineer that everybody should know. He said, all you're doing to produce electricity is you're keeping your dipole open. Now, an analogy would be a battery. So a battery. Why does a battery produce energy? Because you've got more negative charge on one side than you've got on the one side. And so when you connect this to a circuit, now it starts to equalize. Like the negative charge is going this way, and once it neutralizes out, no more energy anymore. So what's the answer to that problem? Keep your dipole open. Make it so that it never neutralizes. As long as this battery never neutralizes, it will produce infinite energy. Because where's that energy coming from? It's coming from the ether all around us. So the simplest way to do that is to produce plasma. Because all you're doing when you're making plasma is you're taking like a hydrogen atom and you're ripping the electron off of it, the negatively charged electron. Let me just change my orientation. You rip the negatively charged electron from it, and now you're left with a positively charged ion. And you do this on a large scale, and what are you left with? You're left with an asymmetry where you have a bunch of negative charge here and positive charge here, just like the battery. So what happens? Electricity happens. And what do we call that? Lightning. There you go. Just connected it for you there, guys. That's how free energy works. Oof.
It's crazy. Boy. It's like they're like, hey, this could be free. And somebody else was like, yeah, or we could monetize it.
And that guy, good old JP Morgan, like quite literally JP Morgan was that guy. Like, oh, we can monetize it. And Edison. And so, and you look at that and you're like, damn, like this is dark. Because now you're like, we're talking about going back 100 years of suppression. And it really just makes you wonder about, you know, like I said, about the non-human intelligence. There's all these options. My favorite one's breakaway civilization. Where like you
That's
think
where
about,
I wanted to go. Let's talk about breakaway civilizations.
Let me dive into it then. I'll do the quick intro. Is that the breakaway civilizations? This idea that like if we've been able to hide this well, then maybe there is like a Wakanda, if you're into Marvel, like this secret civilization that's just been living in parallel to us. That we're just so idiots, we just somehow never realize they're just sitting right there with this advanced technology. And maybe one of the ways is that they look just like us, like they're our cousins, or we are the aliens, or however you want to think of it.
Kind of like how we don't go to Antarctica and there's a treaty and nobody does anything down there. You don't fly over the South Pole.
That's where the Nordics come from. Yeah.
Weird. Yeah.
Well, and that, and like you can, that makes me, I have to ask you now, like if you want to talk about it a little bit, your conversation with Jason Jormanji, I think is how you pronounce his last name.
Jason Giorgiani. Yeah.
Giorgiani. Yes.
He's a great guy. Wow.
Dude, that conversation is a lot of fun to listen to. But you guys talked about the Nordics and the theories on like what could have happened, like how like time travel is possible if you have like this 0 point energy and all that, and like what could have been like Atlantis, like dude, this is why I nerd out and go full autism on this topic so hard.
He really does.
Like once confirm. Because once you get the 0 point energy thing into conversation where people can grasp that it is real and possible, then you're talking about like the universe is your oyster. You can go anywhere. You can do anything.
Fun again. Like science and physics is boring as hell under the mainstream view, where nothing is possible. We can't go anywhere. We're all stuck. We can't do anything cool. And then you're like, nope, ether is real. Faster than light travel, faster than light communication might be possible. It's like everything you see in Star Trek, even transmutation, potentially starting replicators are. Everything's on the table now. Like this is what I love about it and why I push it, because I think it could give a lot of people purpose out there. There's so many people I see every single day that just have no purpose in life. And you're like, how would the world be different if like we just were like, the world is so much bigger than what we imagine, everybody. Let's focus our collective effort on advancing ourselves and trying to catch up to where we could potentially be.
Well, the only advancements we've seen for the last 5 decades is social media and the iPhone.
Well, let's not forget the fact that we are Bitcoin veterans. There's some technology in that, right? And maybe it's a good idea to bring some of that into this, right? In terms of how do you keep all of the secret? How do you go about creating all these things? How do you what is the apparatus that makes something like plasma orbs that can teleport entire airplanes full of people possible? And it's fiat cursed money, right? Like it's one of those things where I'm kind of glad we're starting to discover this kind of stuff, but the fact that in the future this fiat money that's used for black ops and everything else is going to go away, and you're going to have to open source this to people to say, hey, this is what we're doing, or at least groups of people that you maybe trust and want to go after. Like, hey, this is what we're doing with this technology. This is what we need from the people that are out there. And kind of, Ashton, to your point, it's like when you start to look at this from a 50,000 foot level, instead of being so so wrapped up in your own existence and this ego and everything else, you start to get out to like, what is going to be our legacy? What are we going to do for not only our kids, but the generations down the line? And we have some interesting rocks out here in my backyard that some guys left a long time ago, like 10,000 plus years. And you're sitting there going like, man, what are we going to do to make sure that our progeny is left a better tomorrow than we have now, and that they don't forget, hey, you can get wiped out off of these rocks pretty quick. Like, we should probably figure this out as a species so that we can continue going.
Yeah, because we're probably going to wipe ourselves out with this technology. Let's not lie to ourselves, guys. Like, we don't stand a chance. I've seen some TikTok videos of people who are like going to burn their houses down wearing like lingerie while they're filming a live stream. And I'm just going, okay, yeah, we got no chance with this technology if this goes widespread. And honestly, this is where I say, like, I see both sides of it in terms of why they would hide the technology. I'm not one of those people who's like delusional about it, but like, I get it. Okay, we're hiding it because it's dangerous. It's really, really dangerous, and it's also going to like collapse the economy. Now, not in like necessarily a bad way, but like, some industries become obsolete overnight, like that kind of thing. Yeah. Like, how does the stock market even react? That's a huge shock, which is why I think they've been kind of dripping a lot of this technology out. So there is that side of it. In fact, the way I look at it is the side that wants nothing to come out to the public, and then there's the side that wants like just aliens to come out to the public. And then meanwhile, there's me
no
coming
nuance
out here and other people going, nope, screw that. You guys are hiding free energy. Here it is. And so it's like, why am I on that side? Well, because they zapped a plane and they won't admit that they zapped a plane out of the sky. If they, one thing I would say too is a lot of people think that like a lot of people are just like this benevolent hero that is no blemishes. Would I sell out? Yeah, I'd sell out. I said I'd sell out for $10 million when I started this if they wanted this to go away, because I realized the danger associated with this. But I want the validation that like this is actually real, and I'm not a crazy person who's imagining that we teleported a plane. Like, it's kind of important to me. So, but of course they didn't do that. So that's the reason why I push forward. Now, one thing I want to point out, you say like in terms of how would we open source this? Like, absolutely, open sourcing it is important in terms of I think that's how I took the approach to the investigation. Live stream everything. Real reactions. You can see the highs and the lows, everything you can see in real time. You have that recorded out there forever. So it's really hard to fake genuine reactions to things over long periods of time. Now, but in that perspective, I want to point out this. A good analogy to this is like the defense contractors have labs that are much more equipped than anything any private lab or person is ever, in terms of individuals have access to. The people like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, their stuff is like, there's no comparison. This is sort of like trying to compete and do what they're doing is kind of like trying to set up your own like NBA or NFL. Like, this isn't the kind of situation where you can just jump in and start competing and doing their stuff. You can.
I don't know. I think us four white boys could take it on.
Yeah, we got this. We're gonna start it up. Like, you can make small scale effects, and there are people doing it, like Falcon Space Labs. Mark Sokol, I've interviewed him, Jeremy Reese, and this whole crew of guys on APEC. They are trying to do that, but the effects they get aren't big enough to like make people realize, like, blow their minds to throw, go, oh, there is this whole branch of physics we're missing. It's not giant enough, even though it does work on a lot, based on a lot of people's work that, I've researched and talked about, people like Thomas Townsend Brown, etc. In order to produce like the giant balls of plasma, like we're seeing with those videos, like that's defense contractor stuff. Like, that's the stuff where they've got the labs where you sign the NDA before you go into the lab that says, like, if you talk about this, we disavow you, your life is a forfeit, sketchy, scary stuff like that. Like, those are people making that stuff. So, and I think that now the other flip side of it is we are getting to the point with like 3D printing, AI starting to figure this stuff out, the development of metamaterials and materials that have basically metamaterials an element that's we're combining together multiple elements that's producing an effect that's unique to either of those elements, a brand new effect essentially. And the smaller scales that we get to, the easier that is to do that. And same with then microchips, because microchips, all you're doing with microchips is you're working the smallest scales, in some cases the atomic scale, and you're taking a little tiny microchip and you're placing elements together at the right locations, distances, and mixtures to produce the exact effect that you want to create. So like with the Casimir cavities, which is one thing I talk about all the time by Bernard Haish and Garrett Model, they've basically realized that they can produce a semiconductor or a superconductor and an insulator and then another semiconductor of a different type, slightly different mixture. And they can produce this asymmetry that essentially pulls a little bit of energy out of the 0 point energy. And it's a very tiny scale in terms of how much energy it's pulling, but it is pulling energy out. They've done the tests on it. And so if you were to take that and then turn it into like an array or scale it up, then in theory you could have a microchip or, a microchip, very small microchip that has a very powerful effect on the macroscopic level. And in this case, what would we be talking about? We'd be talking about a free energy microchip that you put in your phone, and it's just constantly in there somewhere sucking energy out of the 0 point field.
You don't need to charge your phone anymore.
Sorry, what?
And you wouldn't need to charge your phone effectively anymore. And
Precisely.
that's part of the
you
equation.
Wouldn't need a huge amount of energy, right? Because over time, and you can still have a battery in it that it charges up.
Yeah.
And then you just hit a point where when the battery gets full, you have it stop working or something, right? So
Yep.
yeah.
Well, that's like
That's
part
our
of like
future.
that's part of like the big like equation as far as like why would they want to keep it secret or like hidden? It's like because we can't like they can't afford to, and you kind of touched on it too with like the threat to the economy. The entire our entire global economy, all the way down to nations and states, is based on the cost of energy, and 0 point energy brings the cost of energy to zero. So like then you're talking about, oh, well, then like smelting, anybody can effectively do it as long as they have the technology or the equipment set up to be able to do it. And then you're looking at some very it gets scary for some people, because then effectively anybody can, like we were talking earlier, can use that 0 point energy to create a black hole and everything's gone. Or the average individual can use that to, say, black hole themselves to beta reticuli or Regulus and get out of town before somebody else creates a black hole and disappears everybody.
Yeah, and what I would say is that it's not going to go to zero right away, but that's the idea, right? Is the trajectory starts to go to zero. Now, even if you take like NG8, which is this cold fusion company that I've been looking into, which I think is legitimate, not 100% sure, they're not sponsoring me to say this. They had like a graph that shows the comparisons, like even coal and all the other stuff, solar, their cold fusion, which is creating ball plasma and pulling electricity out in the form of electricity. No bullshit about spinning things and steam. They claim they had over unity of 3 to 5, which is nice, and they can produce a 100 kilowatt reactor, which is very powerful as well. So they have a form of over unity there potentially that is, I think they said it's 80% cheaper than the next best alternative, which if it was like wind or what have you. So we're not going to zero right away, but you're going to 20%. Imagine 20% of your energy cost. That's huge.
Wow.
And then, yes, to your point, if you could buy one of those reactors and the price of those reactors goes down. Right now, they're trying to build one for like $4 million. That's like an industrial one that you could run like something that's very power intensive, like a bunch of washer dryers or something like that. Or a data center. Yes, data centers are a big one. But if you have a smaller one and you have that in your house, I imagine a world where you don't have like a hot water heater or furnace anymore. Instead, you just have like a cold fusion plasma reactor down there. And it's safe. It's very small and tiny, but it effectively produces unlimited energy. And then maybe you have like a battery pack down there next to it that's charging up so that you have excess overflow for times when you're in high use, right?
Yep.
And that's how everything works. And then you can use that to heat, cool. You can use it for everything that you want to do in your house.
Exactly.
And then again, the cost of that now, if you have that and you own that device, it would be effectively nothing. And of course, there will still be times where people are trying to sell you energy, but the idea that energy price goes down to the point of the politics side is that it reduces, if not eliminates, our dependence upon the government. And we can live wherever we want. We can still be connected on the internet and do everything we want. We're completely off the grid. It's huge.
And one last thing before we get moving on to sponsors and then story time real quick. You mentioned that term over unity. For those in the audience that haven't heard that before or are questioning, I would recommend going to YouTube and Googling Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bearden, which Ashton brought him up earlier. There's a ton of stuff on him. You're going to find a lot of videos that do not have a whole lot of views. So that's going to actually give credit to their reality of the videos, because not many people know who he is. He specifically talks about over unity and how you can build. I think he talks about engineering specifically a magnet motor and how you need to time the magnets in order to continue like the revolutions to be able to get to reach over unity. Just so everybody's aware, you can look it up pretty easily.
Yep. All right, real quick word from our sponsors. We'll come back with story time. It's a short one, but it's a good one. A big shout out to our friends over at Punchplate, Coddle.co. That's CODL.co. Punch plates are a durable medium for your Bitcoin and can store 12 words or 24-word Bitcoin backups. Storing your Bitcoin in metal ensures your keys will survive in the elements, accidental spills, and in some cases even fire. You don't have to worry about smeared ink or ripped paper and can sleep soundly knowing your Bitcoin are inscribed on a punch plate. These are the best prices you're going to find in this industry. $24 for a 24-word punch plate. It's simple. It's a punch and a plate. No little letters, no stamps with letters on them. Just a punch and a plate. Go check them out at coddle.co. That's punch plate at coddle.co. Solo Satoshi is dedicated to the advancement of open source Bitcoin mining with a steadfast commitment to the security and decentralization of the Bitcoin network. As a pioneering force in the Bitcoin space, their mission is to empower individuals and businesses worldwide with innovative, secure, and decentralized mining solutions. At Solo Satoshi, they believe in the transformative power of open source software and the potential it holds for the future of Bitcoin mining. They strive to foster a community of developers and enthusiasts who share our vision of a more secure and decentralized Bitcoin landscape. Our dedication to open source principles is at the heart of their mission, driving their commitment to transparency, collaboration, and innovation. They are passionate about supporting the growth and the development of the Bitcoin network, and they recognize the critical role that open source software and developers play in achieving this goal. By promoting and contributing to open source ecosystems, they aim to facilitate a more robust and resilient Bitcoin network, ensuring its longevity and success for years to come. At Solo Satoshi, their mission is not only to provide cutting-edge mining solutions, but also to educate and inspire others about the importance of decentralization and open source principles in the Bitcoin space. They believe that by working together, we can create a future where Bitcoin mining is more accessible, efficient, and aligned with the core values of decentralization and open collaboration. All right. Thanks to our sponsors. We really appreciate it. Go out there and check those guys out. I think it's everybody's favorite time of the show. It is story time.
Ooh.
Who the fuck said that? What have we got here? A fucking comedian, private joker.
All right. This is where our guests come in and they tell a humorous story. Ashton's got one for us tonight. And I got to tell you, I think, after everything we've been talking about tonight, the Bitcoin miners are just licking their chops in terms of 0 point energy and making this kind of stuff happen. But Ashton, the floor is all yours.
So I was going to tell you this other story, but I'm just going to tell you that and then just give you a bonus anyway. So I was going to tell you guys about how when I was on Emerald, not a lot of people realize this, Emerald Robinson, when she said at the end of one of like the third or fourth time I was on, she said she loved talking to me. And I said, I love you too, in a way where it was like a romantic thing. It was really, really awkward. And that was going to be my story. But you know what? I just threw that out there just as a little teaser. My real story is this, is when I went to go talk with Candace Owens, I was terrified. but I was going to go no matter what, because I didn't know what her position was going to be on the videos. It's not like we had any long conversation at a time. It was like, hey, you want to come on my show? Yes, of course. You know, no matter what your position is. And I had seen her destroy people, like that Rabbi Shmuley guy, like literally destroy a man's career. And so I'm like, you know, you're a little nervous because you're like, even if you're in a position of being in the right, you can see how people can slant things, especially on their own show. So I was nervous going on, and I'd done my research on her. She had never talked to anybody about UFOs or advanced technology or anything like that on any show, except for one time on Tim Pool, where he asked her about it, and she like kind of brought up that a story where like she might be open to it, but I had expected her to be very close-minded to it. So I get there, I get to her studio, and I'm chatting with her and her producers ahead of time, and I'm not sure how this is going to work out, what have you, right? And one of the first things is she just basically kind of tells me, because I tell her that I was worried about coming. She's like, oh, no, I'm totally open to the government having like secret advanced technology. And I was like, oh, okay. Like the last thing I expected from Candace Owens, who's normally about politics and social issues and things like that. And so then, of course, we had a really awesome conversation. You guys can watch the interview, and kind of, you know, I think a lot of it might have gone a little bit over her head, like it does, the science and physics does with a lot of people. But, you know, the black operations side of it and understanding just advanced technology in general, like, you know, she was totally into. So it was a scary time for me, but ended up being a really fun experience.
That's awesome. That's actually interesting. I would have thought you guys would have had more reconnaissance back and forth on like what you're going to talk about. I was like, hey, you just want to come on the show? I am personally concerned that you're going to use this to crucify me and humiliate me in a very public format. So
I was definitely thinking it, but actually with a lot, especially the big name people, there's not a lot of discussion in most cases. Now, of course, maybe you hit it off and you're buddy, you become friends, then sure, of course. But in a lot of cases, it's like, you know, in some cases, it's just the booking agent getting in touch with you. Like, hey, so-and-so wants to talk to you. Like with the Hodge twins, I never spoke to them beforehand. It was like just through their people. And yeah, the Hodge twins want to talk to you and have you come on. Like, oh, okay, great. And actually, when I first met, here's another fun story. So when I met the Hodge twins, I like showed up to get to the studio at the exact time. I see them coming in at the same time, like, hey guys, it's me. And they didn't recognize me at all. It was super awkward. I'm the guy. They're like, oh, do you need help with something? I'm like, no, I'm the guy you're interviewing like right now. Like, you know, recognize me.
I love one of their first comments. They're like, man, you look smart.
They're so funny. Those guys are awesome. And they have a wall of pictures of all the people that have been on there as well. So I'm up there with people like Destiny and Nick Fuentes, but then they also have people like RFK and what have you on their wall. So
there's a wide assortment of personalities right there alone.
But yeah, so honestly, like if those videos end up getting authenticated, like Edward Sealand or whatever, it's going to end up turning out that Candace Owens beat these other podcasters that talk about UFOs all the time to like real disclosure. Like it's going to turn out that like Rogan, let's use him as an example. He talks about UFOs famously the most with people. Most of the people that he's talking to are the people that I would call the woke disclosure people, where, and in fact, in some cases, they know that the 0 point energy stuff's real, but they also are directed. It's a national security issue. So, you know, they're directed to steer the conversation away from those topics and then into the topics like, oh, yes, but aliens are real. And isn't that crazy? Like how it's going to change our lives. And won't this like destroy religious people? Blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know, stupid shit.
Like Lou Elizondo and Jeremy Corbell.
I wasn't going to name them, but yeah. And
I'll name them. We can put that on me. That's me. I don't like either one
Ross
of them.
Coulthart. I mean, I think that, you know, and it's weird because I think that their political affiliations, not that I know for a fact what their political affiliations are, but like, yeah. And even Gary Nolan is another one too. Like they're all connected. You see them all retweeting and resharing each other's content all the time. And they all are sharing this same narrative. And the thing that's bugging me out about what they're doing now is like, they went from, okay, aliens are real to now, now psionic abilities are real. Like that's the thing that they're pushing now, like telepathy and remote viewing and stuff like that, versus like, hey, can we just establish that like aliens are real or that like there's this technology there before we start getting into psychic abilities and stuff like that? Because to me, the thing about that is that like I think they look at it from the perspective of their community that they're catering to. but that's a very small niche of people versus normal. I call them normal people. Everybody else that's out there that I like to think that I at least was one of, where those people look at that stuff about psychic powers. The moment that Jake Barber guy starts talking about the egg was sending him psychic messages and shit like that and making him feel happy, like, bro, that throw the interview in the trash at that point. Like, the
That's
public is
drugs.
not going to be convinced by a guy talking about psychic messages from UFOs.
I think
right?
that's actually the point.
Exactly. I think that's the point, is to make it silly, to make it not serious,
Yep.
and then, but also to cater to this community they've created, that now they've created this whole industry around in terms of,
Well, and it gets to the point of like government, specifically the U.S. government. I was actually just watching the movie Sicario 2 last night, and it made me think of this. Was that the government's not in the business of change?
Yeah.
Like, they want stasis. They want everything to stay the same. And guess what? Money managers want the exact same thing, because money managers love socialist governments, because they know precisely where the money's going to go. They know precisely how to forecast. Capitalism is very chaotic, very volatile. You don't know what's coming next. They don't like it whatsoever.
Yeah,
What's that?
Freedom and open source technology is tough for those guys to control.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize the thing that you mentioned, though, is that the thing about change, especially from the financial perspective, like, I've been a consultant for 20 years and I've been a freelance consultant. The thing the client wants the most is they want consistency on your billability. Like, okay, they want you billing 40 hours every week. Like, they just want that consistency. They don't need you to be billing 60 one week and then 35 the other week. They want there to be like, they want everything to go according to the plan. As long as it goes according to the plan, they don't really care. This is one of those secrets of anybody that does like contract work with consulting and what have you in the general. Of course, there's going to be some penny pinchers that are out there. There always are. But in general, it's just everything going according to the plan. So Lockheed Martin, they'll sell you, I don't know what these F-35s cost. Let's just call it $100 million. That might even be low. They'll sell you these, and then they'll secretly have anti-gravity technology that obsoletes those on their side. Why? Because it's just, here's stuff that we're selling you. You're giving us the money. What doesn't matter the relevance of the technology, right? In fact, the U.S. government, the intel agency, prefer that other technology is kept in the background, and then they only use that technology, if things were to go really poorly. Or here's a scary thought: let's say there is one of these nuclear winter scenarios, and they just decide, you know what, we're not going to use it. We're going to keep the technology. We're going to let people get wiped out. We're going to let this event happen. And then we're going to spin that event to our advantage, and we'll rebuild the world with ourselves being the superpower with our orb technology. This is the last thing. Is the reason why I bring that scenario up is, like, when people say, why let people have this? This is dangerous. It's because the worst people on the planet already have it, apparently, and they're teleporting airplanes. So do I trust those people? No, I don't trust those people. So we might as well just let everybody have it.
Might as well. Oh, Ashton, man, this hour and almost 2 hours has gone by extremely quickly, man.
Well, tell me though, what questions do you guys have? Like, what burning questions have you thought about from like a layman's perspective? Not really layman's, you guys are also veterans, so go ahead.
Jordan's trying to ask something. Jordan, come off mute so we can hear you.
Yeah, Jordan.
Oh, such an idiot.
There he is.
No, it wasn't that important. You were talking about they've got this technology, but that can obsolete what they're selling you. But yeah, they're going to keep selling you anything if you're going to take it. Like, you could just look, they do it with vehicles. Like, they have something as simple as like rolling your windows down. You just have to hit it once, but like, to get it back up, that's a new feature. That'll be out next year. Yeah. And it's like, you could very easily do this with all my windows and it would cost you nothing. In fact, a lot of times the chips, everything, it can do it. It's just going in the computer and programming. It doesn't cost them any extra. It's just, we are going to nickel and dime you every step of the way if we can.
Razors and razor blades. There's rumors that they've made light bulbs that would never you never need to replace them, you know? And it's a lot of stuff like that. So they've done it, they do it. One more topic though that you guys might enjoy that I just had in my notes here was that with Jason Giorgiani. That conversation was amazing. You guys should check it out if you haven't watched it.
Yeah, you guys should.
The reason why I wanted to talk to him is because I saw a clip of him on Danny Jones where he's talking about 0 point energy technology, and he was correctly pointing out that when you use this like warp drive technology, you're quite literally manipulating space-time. And when you manipulate space-time like this, there are time dilation issues, which means
Yes.
this warp drive technology is a time machine. So then it brings up the question, well, okay, well, what really is time travel? And when you look at the movie Interstellar and look at this time dilation effect that happens, you realize it's actually real. And it's actually been tested and proven going back like 40, 50 years that this time dilation effect is real, which means simply that time, the way that it works is it's a dial and you can change the rate of time. So imagine like fast forward or slowing down, slow-mo or fast forward. Depending on how much mass you're near, you change the rate of time. So more mass would mean you slow down, you get slower and slower. Less mass and less mass relatively would mean that I'm going really fast, I'm going faster and faster, like that, right? So that's a very weird phenomenon. And it's all connected to this idea of a frame of reference that Einstein would say. It's all based on your frame of reference. So what it means is that you might have one person next to a very large amount of mass and a person next to basically no mass. And the person that's next to a ton of mass, for them, it's going to, for both people from their perspective, it's going to look like time is moving normally. But from the one person looking at the other, one of them is going to look at the other and it's going to look like they're moving in super speed. And the other one's going to be looking back and they're going to be looking at the other person moving in super slow motion. And so this is how time corrects itself. So that if those people were to meet again in the future, this person might have only aged like a couple hours, but this person's now aged a decade, right? But from both of their perspectives, they were experiencing time run normally. So that's one of the weirdest phenomenons, and that's how time travel would work. So what it would mean is that if you could manipulate that energy density, that mass, that rate of time, you could freeze yourself where from your perspective, only an hour goes by where you're just hanging out in, the ether or whatever. But from the perspective of the rest of the universe, the world, 100 years has gone by. Or 1,000 years have gone by. So you could time travel to the future just using the idea of time dilation. You get in your spacecraft and you go, I'm going to go mess around with my spacecraft and I'm going to go fly over to Proxima Centauri, the nearest star system. And you go there and you go have a nice vacation where you check out the star system and you see it and you're like, oh, this is sweet. And you come back to Earth and now it's been 10 years. Your wife left you, your family left you, everybody assumed you were dead. But no, seriously, because this is how it might actually work in the real world. We don't know for fact, but that's how time dilation gets very bizarre.
Yep. And we're trying to end it here, but there's one last thing I'll add to that.
Just one more.
A very interesting story.
We're in extra time
here. Bonus time or encore. There's a story of an individual, and I'm sorry I don't remember his name, but I'm sure with what I'm going to talk about, you could probably find him and Google him. There was a guy back in, I believe, the 60s or 70s, it might have been even before that just kind of showed up out of nowhere, and he made, I believe, 120 trades on the stock market, didn't lose a single penny, turned it into 6 figures, I believe was the minimum, and he got apprehended by law enforcement because they were like, what did you do? How did you do it? And how did you know to do it, like when to do it, and how you could execute it? Because this is not possible for somebody to know exactly what the market is going to do and be able to make all this money off of it. Like, I'm not even talking about the Stanford Research Institute's like work with like the psionic abilities to like remote view.
Remote viewing.
Yeah. And this guy, he didn't, like, as far as I know from the story, he didn't really say anything because this was all documented in like newspaper clippings and everything. And then they keep him apprehended. They keep him in custody. And they go back to grab him from his cell, and he's gone. It's like, okay, so does this guy have like a little mini 0-point energy watch or something to where he's using this time dilation and not only time dilation, but the travel in and out? Like, this is possible. I could see it.
Yeah, I mean, in the future, it could be. Or if somebody had figured this out. The thing about this science and technology as well is that, and this is kind of goes back to the Jason Giorgiani interview, is that it could be ancient as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be from some far future for us as well. Is that we look at how far and quickly we've advanced. I think it's quite silly to imagine that we're the first advanced civilization in the universe or even in our galaxy. Maybe not even the first advanced civilization in our solar system. So from that perspective, there could be a legacy group that survived. And honestly, we should look at that as a good thing because it means we can jump up the tech tree like way faster if we figure that science and that technology out.
Yeah.
And then we start to jump up. But at the same time, it does mean that there's going to be some huge shock to our system upon revealing that. And then, maybe there is some way to go back in time. Negative time is a real phenomenon. The math shows that negative time should be real, but does it really mean that we go back to a previous past? I don't know. I do think that it could mean that you could intercept a communication from the future and then know that information, to corroborate what you just said, and be able to manipulate what's going to happen in the future with the stock market.
Yep.
Which is a pretty crazy thing that you might be able to do. You can realize this is why this technology, just considering the implication of any of that, even if that part's not real, but you can still just do the time dial thing. Just doing that, you can realize you can't let normal people just have this. This is way too powerful. We're talking like God tier technology at this point, right?
Yeah. You need a serious level of intelligence and wisdom to not abuse that. This has been a fun conversation, Ashton. I'm really glad that you joined us, man. I gave me my fix to get out a lot of the autism out there and really help get a lot of people to understand that the science fiction is more reality than it is a Hollywood.
It's more
production.
science than it is fiction.
Yeah,
and it's fun. It's fun. It's that it gives us to look at science again and wonder. Whereas I think the people that are going to have their minds broken are going to be the people that think that we've got it all figured out. I've actually heard a lot of PhD people say, well, we've got it all figured out at this point. We are not even close.
It's somebody who bought their PhD.
Cavemen, like you said earlier. We are cavemen, and we're barely scratching the surface.
The people that think they are the smartest people are the most closed-minded, ignorant people. It's just I don't know if a lot of these things that we discussed are necessarily true or not, but I am at least open-minded to it. And you're not going to figure it out if you don't go into it with an open mind.
Yeah.
And these conversations are more fun than those conversations where everything's, oh, no, that's not possible. Negative energy is an exotic substance. We'll never know. We'll never understand where gravity came from. Isn't it just more fun to be okay, let's just speculate on where it could be coming from. And in this case, it's really fun because it's going to end up being true. So this is going to be great.
Yeah.
Maybe not immediately, but I think that people will see, in 10, 15 years, look back at these conversations and go, wow, those guys were really way ahead of the curve on this one.
They were on it.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Well, let's throw it around and any parting thoughts from you guys.
Ashton, I just wanted to say, I love you.
Love you too. I love you too.
Got some security in here. That's great.
My final thought is that when it comes to the Bitcoin stuff, I wonder what the implications of free energy would be on crypto in general. And people have told me that there are ways to potentially slow the mining down and stuff like that, what have you. But the other side of it too is that this quantum computers might be able to break encryption as well, where now is it even safe anymore? So what I would be curious to hear more conversations about in the future is what the implications of this type of energy and technology are on crypto. And I don't think it would destroy crypto, but how would crypto have to adapt to accommodate for an environment like that? That's my
I can make two quick comments on that before my last comment or closing comment. Two things that come to mind immediately for the 0 point energy stuff, because I'm fascinated with the Bitcoin mining aspect, would be that Bitcoin would be pretty well suited for it. It's got the automatic kind of difficulty adjustment algorithm within it. It would just make it extremely difficult. It would probably be perpetually difficult because 0 point energy is infinite. So it would just be really ratcheting it up. At which point we may actually find the limit to the difficulty adjustment. That would be interesting, but you could just soft fork that away. The devs would be able to figure that out. Now, the interesting thing with the Bitcoin miners would be that we're looking at an interesting arms race with Bitcoin mining right now. The first Bitcoin miner that figures out 0 point energy and plugs it into their Bitcoin mining operation, they're going to beat out everybody almost instantly. because they would be able to gobble up like the amount of energy that's being required or pulled by the network. And the third thing would be even more interesting for everybody that already has Bitcoin, which if you don't have some, I recommend you get some, would be that for this justification, with that once you plug in a 0 point energy source into the Bitcoin mining like algorithm, you're effectively you've won. Like you're not going to be able to really disrupt the network at that point, because the amount of energy that you would need to disrupt the network would have to match the amount of energy that is currently protecting the network, which is the entire slew of the Bitcoin miners. That's for the ZPE point. And then the quantum computing stuff it's kind of like a nothing burger. Because quantum computing, if you break the algorithm, which is the SHA-256 encryption algorithm that's protecting the Bitcoin network, that's the same algorithm that's protecting our nuclear weapons arsenal. And so like
There's
They
bigger
do it no matter
problems.
what. Okay, I wasn't
Yeah,
sure where you
so-
were going with that. Okay.
yeah, so if you crack that code, there's a lot bigger things to be worried about than the Bitcoin network. And at that point, it's a matter of time for the open source dev network to figure out a soft fork fix to that, and then the network just continues chugging along like a weed, like it was before.
Yeah, and in quantum computing, I mean, you're talking about what 100 qubits right now in terms of processing power, which isn't, it's not a ton in terms
So
of
one of them
the
is 5,000 that I was looking at. So there's some, and that's what's public. So we imagine, what does the
maybe
government military have?
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
But I mean, to expand on that further, you would have to have something that was 100 to 500 million times what it is now, right? And at least to the exposed source. So in that time frame, in terms of introducing quantum computing, it doesn't even really exist in terms of the way we know just linear computing to begin with. So the devs have all the time in the world right now to kind of start playing around with the idea of going out and doing a soft fork, and if quantum computing actually makes it mainstream at some point, we'll see. But yeah, Bitcoin's going to hold up pretty well. The rest of crypto is probably going to go to zero against Bitcoin anyway. So it's just one of those. We're not worried about it in the Bitcoin community right now. That's for sure.
Got it.
But yeah, some interesting thoughts in terms of the energy, Mike. I mean, the fact that if you get a miner that understands 0 point tech for energy, those guys win the entire thing.
Yeah.
Well, all right. I have my theories, but we've been trying to wrap up for like 30 minutes, and I could just go on. But
I will, like, for my last comment, I will suggest that everybody that's listening, especially our community, if you guys aren't in Ashton's Discord group, like, get in there. Like, I finally just joined like maybe a couple weeks ago, and I'm really kicking myself in the ass for not doing it, because like you're like the amount of information that we've shared here pales in comparison to the amount of like patents and research that his group is finding and sharing on a minute by minute basis. It's if you're an autist, and many of us in the Bitcoin space are, like, you got to be careful, because it's going to be a drug.
many of us in the veteran space are too, Mike.
Well, we got both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Discord's huge now. In fact, I was trying to figure out if I had to reorganize it, because there was so much stuff being shared. There's clips. We have a whole section for scientific papers.
That's where
and at this point now, you could search through it, and you could find all the mysteries of the whole entire universe in our Discord. I feel like at this point. So, and honestly, we do a good job of keeping it where sometimes you have people come in, they start rabble rousing, stirring trouble, but for the most part, for as big as it is, it's pretty well managed. There's not that many arguments or heated discussions. So.
Nice.
I'm very proud of this community of MH370X. Like, it's we do fun, jokey stuff, memes, things like that. But then we're also just like figuring out anti-gravity and cold fusion. And there's people that are my followers who are engineers and aerospace, people, things like that. And then people who are younger, who are like just interested, trying to learn, and going to be the next people who figure out how to make warp drive and stuff for us in the public sphere.
Hell yeah,
man,
it's cool.
All right, Jordan, Mike, final comments.
I've shared mine, man. I've talked enough.
This has been awesome. This has kind of like combined a few different rabbit holes that I have been going down, and now I just have more material to go down. So I really appreciate you coming on and talking. This was awesome. Clearly, we could talk for at least another hour without even trying.
Yeah, we'll have to do another one, and yeah, maybe next time another Cybertruck thing happens or something like that, and we can dig more into the Bitcoin side of it and the crypto stuff like that, because there's a lot of crossover, a lot of crossover.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think my final thoughts is I love what this community is bringing together. I mean, you've got everybody from veterans, you've got guys on the energy side, you've got guys on the mining side, you've got financial guys, you've got all of these people out there, fight sports, you name it, proof of work people, right? And these proof of work meritocracy people that are coming together under their own free will. They're changing the world, exposing things, coming up with new ways to just synergize technologies. Man, it is. It's an amazing time to be alive, and all those doomsayers and everything else out there. Like, yeah, I know there's some crazy shit going on, but at the same time, there's some really incredible things if you get into the right crowds and you focus your energy on the right things. I got to tell you, I just got done with Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and where you focus your time and your energy, that's going to be one of those things where it's going to pay off if you're doing it the right way at higher vibrations. And Ashton, I got to tell you, man, you're a high vibration guy. We've been watching you for a long time over here, and real happy to make that acquaintance and have this time with you, and to have you inform our guys and gals out there. We wish you nothing but the best, and thank you for your time. Look forward to doing it again soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, our pleasure. For everybody else, we do this every Tuesday night, 9 p.m. We also have a Spaces every day at 10 a.m. Eastern. That's hosted by Coleman. A lot of times we'll jump on there as well. We've got great guests coming in. Bitcoin Alaska is going on July 3rd through the 6th. If you don't know about it, bitcoinalaska.org. It is a Bitcoin Veterans Conference, the first one, and they're doing an amazing job. It's going to be absolutely beautiful up there. So July 3rd through the 6th. So get your tickets and get moving, because it's not a huge place, and you might need a place to stay when you're up there. We will see you guys next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Until next time, we'll see you. Peace.